Okay, welcome back to the channel. This is Roberto again. One of the benefits of working for yourself to a degree and doing these videos is I don't care how I'm dressed. Hey, I get to do my job in my pajamas. That's cool. What's my boss gonna do? Fire me? Anyway, um, so we did a 270 versus 25/6 comparison. That was the most selected. The next most selected at the time was the 270 WSM versus the 270 Weatherby Magnum. And the last selected, and has just come up, is the 25/6 versus the 257 Weatherby. So that's what we're doing tonight. Man, you 6'5 guys and you 243 guys, I'll get to you eventually, I promise. But for tonight, the 25 calibers. This is one I haven't really seen much of. So this will be kind of nice to get some information on. Now, just as a quick point, yeah, the 257 Weatherby is indeed faster. Makes sense. It has way more powder volume. But it doesn't necessarily make it more efficient. And I'll explain why as we look at the numbers. And as per usual, I use the same parameters across the board. And I try to keep everything as fair as possible because then we actually truly understand what the ballistics are doing. When we try to compare ballistics with completely separate types of variables, it doesn't make sense. It's not a fair comparison. I'm all about having the most fair comparisons you can see, and I hope it shows in the pattern through my videos. So the 257 Weatherby, being as overbore as it is, does best out of a 26-inch barrel. And so therefore I kept the 25/6 also in a 26-inch barrel. Obviously 65,000 CUP, so copper units of pressure. Again, just for those who are new and seeing this for the first time, for some weird reason, rifles aren't measured in their pressures by pounds per square inch, which is PSI. They're measured in copper units of pressure, and I'll have to make a video explaining the difference. It's kind of goofy, but we'll make it as simple as possible. We're doing a 200-yard zero, all the same parameters when it comes to things like scope height, the zeroing, the elevation, the increments, all of that. And so because we do a 200-yard zero, I jumped straight to 300, and this time we're going to go with a 600-yard max. So using a common bullet that you can find in the 25 calibers, I went with a 115 grain Barnes TSX. Not a very good BC on it. Honestly not good on it at all. But it's a good, solid working bullet it's going to do the job as far as hunting. But starting off of the 25/6 Remington, using the same powders, which is N560, and the max pressure amount of powder you can stick in the 25/6 is 56.7 grains of the N560, and you have a muzzle velocity of 3284 and a muzzle energy of 2755. That's actually moving quite fast. So you're almost at 3,300 feet per second. So it's no slouch. It's a really good velocity and a good amount of energy, which energy doesn't really mean a whole lot. It just kind of gives a general representation of what a bullet can do on game. So don't worry about too much in the powders. I know that there's a whole thing about energies being a scam, but it still gives a general reference. So that's why I write these numbers down. It's not because you have to be too worried about them. It's just that it gives you a general reference as what to expect. So being that it has that kind of velocity, here we go. At 300 yards, you got 2,441 feet per second, 1,521 foot-pounds, a drop of 5.7 inches. At 400 yards, 2,193 feet per second, 1,228 foot-pounds, and 17.3 inches of drop. At 500 yards, you have 1,959 feet per second and 980 foot-pounds of energy with a 36-inch drop. At 600 yards, you have 1,742 feet per second and only 775 foot-pounds of energy with a 64-inch drop. So it's actually fairly flat shooting, but the BC, excuse me, the BC is not that great, so it starts tapering off pretty quick. But you're going to get the same bullet out of the 257 Weatherby, so again, keeping things fair, using the same exact powder, an N560, except this uses a lot more powder, you get 65.1 grains. So you're talking a difference of almost 9 grains. Almost 9 grains more powder. That's a lot. It gets you 3,386 feet per second. And a muzzle energy of 2,927. So I kind of find that interesting. You have literally a separation of 100 feet per second, but it took almost 9 grains more powder to achieve it. Kind of makes you wonder about its efficiency. So at 300 yards, you have 2,525 feet per second and an energy of 1,627 and a 5.3 inch drop. So you're talking about a little flatter, but not by a whole lot. At 400 yards, you got 2,271 feet per second and 1,317 with 16.1 inches of drop. So it's about an inch separate right there, a little over. At 500 yards, you got 2,033 feet per second and 1,055 foot-pounds and 33.7 inches of drop. So again, about an inch, a little over an inch and a half difference. And at 600 yards, 1,810 feet per second with 836 foot-pounds and 59.6 inches of drop. There you're looking at just under 5 inches of separation. So yes, the 25-06 by technicality is indeed the loser here. But there is one thing I will put into this, is that's not a tremendous difference. You know, it's not hard with modern scopes and the turrets that they have on them to dial the difference from 59.6 inches to 64 inches. It's well within the capabilities of these scopes. And your energies are not that far off. 25 and 36. So you're talking like a little over 50. Let's see, 50 and plus that. So 64 foot-pounds. 64 foot-pounds of energy is your separation. Again, not a tremendous amount. And your velocities aren't that far off either. 1742 with the 25-06 at 600, I'm sorry. And 1810. So you're talking like 68 feet per second. So here's what's kind of funny is, even though the 257 Weatherby started off with 100 feet per second faster, it's not maintaining it. which is so strange because it's literally the same bullet. But at the same time, it just doesn't seem to have such a worthwhile advantage that it justifies the cost of them. What's nice about things like the 25 cartridges like the 25-06, which fall in line with the 30-06 and the 270 Winchester, is the commonality. So the cool part is you can go and you can buy a basic entry level rifle like a Savage Axis, an entry level Savage 110, Winchesters, CVAs, a handful of rifles. You can find 25-06 still in manufacturing of brand new rifles. They're not that hard to find, and they're not that expensive. And even ammunition overall, you can still find between $30 and $50 a box. Again, all ammunition has gone up, but factory loadings, you can find a lot of factory loadings offerings in the same price point that you can 30-06, 308, 270 Winchester. So it's actually pretty easy to do that. Also, therefore, making components fairly simple if you're going to do reloading. And if you're doing the proper reloading and you get the right powder, I'm sure you could get over that 3284 feet per second. I just chose one type of powder that seemed to work for both. And so the nice part is, if you were to hand load, I'm sure you could build a much better loading and still keep your costs down around $20 to $25 a box. So there's ways to keep it pretty affordable. The hard part with the 257 Weatherby, outside of a custom, is you're only going to find these in something like a Weatherby Vanguard or a Weatherby Mark V. So your options for rifles are limited. Your ammunition, factory ammunition for this is going to be ridiculously expensive. So even though you're going to go to the store and let's say you're able to even find factory offerings in the 257 Weatherby mag, you're looking at twice the cost, typically between $80 to $110 a box. And if you're going to be spending twice the money, you should be getting a considerably better performance, but you're not. So does it really make sense to have a 257 Weatherby? If you want it because you just want to have it, then go for it. Have fun. But for the average person who's doing these comparisons, or the first-time purchaser, or someone who's new to this, if you're going to go with a 25 caliber, you'd be better off going with a 25-06 because it won't break the bank getting into it. So there you go. There's your comparison. Yes, by technicality and by numbers, the 257 Weatherby mag is the clear winner. However, it's not so different to the point that it justifies its cost. So please like, subscribe, share, comment. That's my take on it. Please tell me if you like it in the comments and what it is that you like to do with it. I think it makes a perfect pronghorn type cartridge, both of them, because they're not too big. Pronghorn, it doesn't take a lot to drop a pronghorn. So that's my take, and we'll talk to you later.